This podcast is part of the How We Are network. For information on this episode and many other like-minded shows, visit howweare.org. That's HOWWEARE.org.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of 100 Words or Less, the podcast. I'm your host, Ray Harkins. I am sitting here on a beautiful day in Southern California. Summer is here. I just finished a salted caramel donut. It was oh so good. I haven't had one of those in a long time, but whew, yeah. Anyways, the guest this week is Justin Pearson. He is a Renaissance man. He has played in a million bands like The Locust, Swing Kids, All Leather, and he currently plays in a band called Retox. He's written books. He's involved in film. The dude is prolific and hardworking. More on him in a minute. Let's get some business out of the way. So for those of you that listened during the month of May, you heard me pimp this fundraising campaign for the show. And some of you listened and donated. And I'd like to thank some of you at the top of the show. A regular listener and a regular email buddy of mine, Nick Giunta, Giunta, a great dude, contributes to the show, tosses me guest ideas. We email on a pretty regular basis. I would say like at least once or twice a week. And I can't thank you enough for your support, Nick. Tip of the hat to you, my friend. And another huge supporter. This guy came in big with a large donation, and I am so humbled by that. I think when people say that it's kind of the opposite effect. Like maybe you're not so humbled. You're kind of like, oh, I expected that. I don't know. In any event, Samuel Brick, I've never spoken with you before, but check your email, bro. I emailed you. Let's talk. Let's get to know one another. Let's be friends. So thank you to both of them. And if you want to jump in on this whole donation process, go to 100wordspodcast.com, check out the right side of the page. You'll be able to click on a link, and then you'll get cool stuff. You'll get buttons, pins, a chance for me to interview you for an upcoming show, other awesome stuff. So check it out, and I appreciate for those of you that listened and donated. Visit propertyofzach.com, our great media partners. Like I said, visit the show's website, 100wordspodcast.com. Email the show, 100wordspodcast@gmail.com. And if you're feeling generous, go and review the show. There's actually 2 new reviews that are just awesome. Like, I think the highest compliment that this show can be paid is the fact that it seems like it's a very relaxed conversation, that the people enjoy being a part of it. It's so amazing because if that is coming across to you, the listener, it's great. I have accomplished my job of making this person that I am interviewing comfortable enough to share things that they don't typically do. So thank you very much. Review the show. Anyways, business aside, I want to talk about something else before I talk to Justin for a long time. This is something I actually mentioned in an interview, I can't remember, a few shows ago, but basically, so I was watching a band called Tokyo Police Club. They're a really good band. I got keyed into them a few years ago from my good friend Jeremy Boehm, and he loved them live, said they were great. So I was like, okay, I got to check them out. This new record's really good. I enjoy it. And so watching them, it was good. It was a good show, solid show. But I couldn't help. I mean, the show was packed. It was probably, I don't know, close to like 800-900 people there. So it was solid. But this is a band that's been around for a while. They're on their, I don't know, 3rd or 4th full length. And, you know, they're plugging away at it. But you always wonder, like, to me, having seen a band like Phoenix, who is, you know, substantially larger than Tokyo Police Club. The whole hierarchy of bands, where it's like, okay, when you're a small band, you wish to be a little bit larger. And then when you are a little bit larger, you wish to be that sort of next level of band. So it's like, you know, what does a band like Phoenix want? Do they want to be like Coldplay? And then, like, what does a band like Coldplay want? Do they want to be a band like U2? It's just an interesting thought process because it just goes to show that, like, there's literally no satisfaction. And while that is obviously a positive thing in regards to the drive and passion that we all feel when we are doing something creative, and that sort of that strive where it's like, I got to do that next thing in order to get this thing. The takeaway that I get from it on the sort of negative side of things is the fact that you're not even relishing that moment when you are experiencing it. It's always that perpetual motion machine of, it's like a treadmill where it's like, oh man, like if there's a little carrot that's held in front of me or a piece of chocolate or whatever the hell you like, you get it, you eat it, and then that's it. And then something else gets held in front of you. And like, there has to be that moment of like, man, that was a really good carrot, or that was a really good piece of chocolate. And sometimes I think that moment is completely lost on the fact that you got to look for the next thing. I'm curious if you have any thoughts or if that's ever entered your mind, but it just kind of started to blow my mind where it's just like, yeah. And then ultimately, once you get to the top, what does a band like U2 need? What does a band like Radiohead need? To just be creatively unencumbered by anything, and basically they can do whatever they want, and that's like true freedom. There's some element to that, but I'm just so curious about that sort of that mindset, and what keeps the desire going. Justin Pearson, like I said, he's played in a ton of bands. He is a very prolific figure within independent music. I personally have loved a majority of the stuff that he's done. He was gracious enough to open his doors to his home in San Diego, and we just chilled out on his couch, hung out, talked for a long time. He shared a lot of different stuff. And it's cool because like he has a very confrontational nature when he is playing live. When I first started to get into music, he was one of those guys that was just like, oh yeah, Justin Pearson, like that guy's a dick, or man, he's kind of arrogant, and there's all these conceptions of a person. I've encountered him on more than one occasion, and he's always been nothing but awesome to me. So it's just always interesting to kind of have those things that still honestly kick around in the back of my mind in regards to like, oh, I remember when that was the common opinion of a person like him. Sitting down with him at his house was just like, well, there's nothing of that. Not even for a second. So anyways, here's my conversation with Justin. I will talk to you afterwards. And just when Locust started to play up there, I mean, you guys obviously played up there a lot, but especially seeing shows at Coos Cafe, it was one of those things where it was like the weirdos that would all congregate on your shows. Because this is like, at the time, like I was, 16, 17 years old. So it's like, my musical palette is like, Earth Crisis, Strife,
Sure.
like that sort of stuff. But then immediately identifying with Locust because it was like, wow, this is aggressive and short and weird and awesome. But then when I would go to a show, it was just like, who are all these people? Like, like these aren't like people like me, but they're all, like all across the spectrum. Was it one of those things like as you guys obviously started to play out, you saw the diversity in people that were like showing up to watch you guys play, or is it just one of those things where you're just showing up like, oh, that's cool, some people are here?
Well, I think it's different because you said your palette was, you referenced like Strife and Earth Crisis, and for me, I think even before the Locust, when I was playing in Struggle,
exactly,
we would play with Strife,
right?
And I felt no alliance to them, or like no,
or you feel like you were peers in a way.
I mean, to an extent, it was like, hey, we're the same age and we play aggressive music, but that was about the extent of it,
right?
So for me, it was always like, oh, but we're playing with Born Against, or we're playing with Tit Wrench, or we're playing with, Rorschach, or someone who's like, who's just a little bit different. I mean, maybe not necessarily musically, but like their fan base seemed a little bit more open.
Sure.
And it wasn't so geared towards a specific, demographic. And I think that was kind of, so by default, like when the Locust started, it was like, oh, now we're all also just like adapting all these other elements of music. Mm-hmm. And we kind of have like this sort of, I don't want to say fan base, but like community that is mixed.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Yep.
And to me, it's like, you can look at things like a lot of hardcore bands, like, not to bash Strife, because it is fine for what it is, but not something I relate to personally.
Sure.
So there's this whole kind of like Strife element, but then I think like, what about like when there was like the Germs and Circle Jerks and stuff, where it was just like freaks and weirdos, or like when I grew up watching that movie Suburbia,
of course, yeah,
and there's like a freaking skinhead hanging out with the punks, like it's like that's just like anything goes, and so it was kind of seemed like, okay, well this is just like a punk scene, but not like, I don't want to use the word punk like punk rock, but like,
right,
but ethically this is like punk, And
Sure.
so it was kind of like fine for everybody.
Yeah. No, and that was even at my younger age of like not having, a ton of show going experience. It was, you guys were truly one of the first bands that I noticed where it was like, okay, people are getting pulled in that are sort of outside of the community, so to speak, where it's like, you could tell like they go to shows, but maybe not the same shows that I was particularly used to. And so it was that, I think the best word, like you said, is that sort of like community.
Because you would see like metalheads and, and like just weird artsy like nerds and like the whole everyone.
Yeah. Was it one of those things like you guys I presume started out with that intent to have like everybody kind of
it was all subconscious. I mean,
right? Yeah, I'm sure you have no intent at that point.
Yeah, we were just like, let's make this music and then let's play, and then all of a sudden it was like these things are happening, and in retrospect, it's like, well, we did this stuff or whatever, and it was cool,
Yeah.
But at the time, we were just like, we have to do this. Like, I don't know, we didn't know the consequences or we didn't even know what was being put into it. We were just like driven by life,
Right. by the angst that we need to express.
Sure. I mean, nothing else mattered. It's like, no matter what, we're gonna just everything will come to this pinnacle.
Right.
That's all that mattered.
And because obviously, I know you cover a lot of your own personal life experiences in your book, and not to kiss your ass, but you did a really good job at that book. I mean, I'm sure. I mean, I can only imagine how difficult it was putting it together, because there's one of those things where it's like when you read a book specifically about some sort of subculture, and obviously it's like you were specific about it, but general enough to where a person who obviously doesn't have the experiences of you and I can read it and still pull something from it. But it's so difficult to capture a voice where it's like I felt like you were. It felt like talking to you when I was reading the book, as opposed to there are other people who have, written books about a subculture that you feel like you could tell there's another person's like heavy influence on it. You know what I'm saying? Was writing a book awful, or like did you enjoy the process? Like, because I imagine that's just really tough.
It was easy. I mean, I would do it on tour when I had time in the van or something, and that was so it wasn't like tough in that sense. But I guess the challenging part was like trying to make it interesting, because I feel like a lot of it, and also in retrospect, I think like I probably definitely could have written the book better. I think that there's certain things I should not have written about. I think there's things that aren't that interesting.
Yeah.
And I think it could have been better.
Sure.
And so, but as far as like the voice goes, I feel like the editor was really cool, and we're like, we don't want to
distort
take that away, But I learned a lot about writing, and then I wrote a second book, and I think that's the second one's way more calculated and funnier, and I think more from a writer's perspective, it's better. It's just a different kind of
right. You went into it with obviously a different approach. Like it wasn't like you said, just the sort of like tour essay sort of thing.
Sure.
I mean, it wasn't obviously all about tour, but like the certain snapshots of your life that you had to kind of like piece together as like an overarching narrative. Yeah. Because you got a sense of that where it was like,
but it also was written, I think, in a strange manner, sort of like how I guess my mind works by writing an album or something, because it's like little chunks of things, and then all of a sudden it comes together and becomes a linear thing. Because I would just write like, I'm gonna write about like Kiss, or like the band Kiss, or I'm gonna I'm gonna write about getting divorced or something, and then after you have like 40.
Did it start like with that simple of like you like this germ of a thought, like I'm gonna write about this thing now? Like was it started off like that, and then you obviously extrapolated from there?
Yeah, because what happened was I was asked to write this tour diary, and I did it, and then I sent it out to some friends, and John Waters was one of them, and he said, you should write a book, and I was like, whatever.
Yeah.
Thanks for this,
thanks for placating. Right, sure.
No, not like in a negative, but like, whatever. And so he said, no, just try it. Just like write a story.
Okay.
And so I was like, So I wrote this one story about going and where I thought I was going to go see Kiss play, and then I wrote it, and I was on tour, and I was like, this is weird, I don't know if this is good, and so I showed it to Gabe and. Gabe Serbian, and he was like, dude, this is hilarious, and so then I sent it to John. I was like, is this what you mean? And he's like, there you go, there's the start of your book. And I was like, whoa.
Like,
and then it like, and that was it. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to obsess on this. And so I guess, I mean, I don't know how writers would write, you know, I mean, I guess there's no real like set way. So, I would just say like, well, shit, what was another thing that happened? Or like, it wasn't even like I was trying to figure it out. I would just be sitting there and I would think about something and be like, oh my God, you know, that was...
What about that time?
That was so wild when we were in Australia and we started a riot.
Right.
You know? And then I'll write about that.
Right,
and then and so it kind of go like in that. And then so after a while I was like, I have like 40 of these stories and let me put these in order. And then it like kind of seemed like a book.
Right. Then you're like, oh, I see. Like, you unintentionally... There were patterns in it that were a through line that you could weave together.
Yeah. And then at one point, you know, I was really lucky not being a trained author or a writer.
Right.
I was very lucky to have an editor that was like patient and had really good constructive criticism and and so she was like, these stories you should take out and then you need to add something between these few stories and then it will make like this kind of cohesive thing.
A more complete project. Yeah. I think anybody that looks at the idea of like a book is so daunting, but it's like, it's cool that you obviously had a positive experience and you weren't, you know, obviously enough to want to do another one. Because I would imagine that a lot of people start and they either never finish or finish one. They're like, I never want to do it.
Yeah. Well, and then I kind of got egged on by a friend to do the second one and it came out really easily and it was very, very specific to electronic. It was about electronic music, 2 stories, and it was easy, and it was nice because the stories were a little bit longer, and it was easy to. I found my writer's voice, and so I was like, oh, I can be funnier, and I can talk more shit about myself, and that was like the key. I was like, I don't want to criticize other people. I think that's very counterproductive. I want to just make fun of, if I'm going to make fun of anything, it'll be myself.
Right.
And that
self-deprecating. Right.
But like, there's a bit of like subversiveness in it because by me making fun of myself, I probably shouldn't even say this, but I'm actually making fun of the other people.
It's
you know?
Right. You were taking a quality from something else that you don't enjoy, putting it in yourself because there's an element of that, and then you're able to like.
Well, because I'm identifying with like my own humility and like how I'm doing something that's like, in a sense, I guess, humbling, or at some point, like, is going to show me that, like, I need to laugh at myself. And then so the other people involved are like very serious, and they're the ones that can't laugh at themselves. And I'm like, well, then they're the ones that they're actually making fun of.
Right. The joke's on them.
Sort of. But then I started working on a third book, and it's full of interviews, and I've never really done that, you know. And it's like so the people are all over. So my idea was to do interviews, do like a couple questions at a time through email, and then let it create a dialogue. Not like here's 20 questions. Yeah, and like answer. Like we're gonna do like a few and see where this goes. But people are not very. Not that they're not responsive. They're just not.
It's hard to engage over email, like to have that sort of like dialogue.
Yeah,
it's difficult because it's like. Not only, like, you obviously have to put the work in yourself in regards to crafting these questions that could hopefully spawn in a conversation. Yeah. The other person, they can want to contribute, but it's like getting them in the right mind frame to want to do that. It's hard.
Yeah, and then so you have one person that's like diarrhea of the mouth, and you have these essays pouring in, and then you have another person where you're like, hey, I sent you 2 questions like a year ago. Do you think you could just answer them?
Just go and take care of that.
You know, just say yes or no.
Right. Let me move on.
Yeah.
Basically, every musical outlet that you have, you know, introduced to the world, they're obviously like it's confrontational. Like either sonically or obviously you guys' stage presence and like you specifically as a person. I mean, you know, like all the way back to obviously struggle. Is it one of those things like there's that gratification of the immediate feedback you get from like the confrontation, or is it one of those things like that comes naturally to you? I mean, I'm sure it's an element of both.
It might be everything you said, and it might be none of it because a part of me, I think, does appreciate the hostility and the not and just like the reaction, any kind of reaction. If it's negative or positive, it's fine as long as they're reacting, because there's a lot of stuff where people just don't give a shit.
Yeah, it's vanilla, right?
And I think apathy is the end of the end. You know, it's like, this sucks. Like, who cares?
Right.
And so, but I'm also not like, I don't really want it to be negative, and I don't want it to be hostile. I you know, like, for a while I remember thinking like, God, this is such a fucking drag. Like, everyone's always fighting us or whatever. You know? And then I remember just at one point I was like, I don't know what it was, like maybe some tour the Locust did or something, and it was awesome. And we're like, whoa, everyone's like really positive, and it's just like such a cool thing. And like, you know, and like, yeah, part of me missed like the because when you have that hostility, you have this drive, you know, and you want to, and it's not that it's like it whatever kind of like violent element is added is not, to me, it's not like pointless violence, and it's not like I'm out fighting people or something.
Yeah,
I'm totally not into violence at all. But that like negativity and that aggressiveness has a meaning, and it's warranted in my opinion. Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, it's like part of me thinks like I'm glad that it exists, and part of me thinks like I wish everything was like cool and didn't have to go through that. But then I also think there'd be no challenge, and there'd be no. I don't know. Like, I think if everyone was just kind of like, oh, we're all like artistic, and we're all into like, you know, super left politics, and and you know, it'd be like, oh, then you live in Portland at that point, you know, and then
and then you just become like an echo chamber, like everyone's saying the same thing. It's, I mean, it strikes me in who you are as a person, and obviously what you've put out artistically. The reputation precedes you as far as like the expectation of that sort of like confrontation, whether it's musically or politically or whatever. Two parts of that there's always a reason behind it, and that you are like you're saying in your book, where you could turn it back on yourself. You took it seriously to a point, but like I always felt like there's always a sense of humor in what you were doing, and like if anybody didn't see that, they weren't looking hard, like, you know, they weren't actually looking at it.
Well, I think also like the element of humor to something that's very serious, politics or something, makes it more digestible. You know, it's not so like, what? This is like textbook. You know, like if there's an element of like entertainment to it, you can kind of get it better, and it seems a little bit more. I'm trying to reference someone that I could appreciate that I don't really necessarily agree with. You know what I mean? But off the top of my head, I can't think of someone. But you think of like someone like George Carlin or like Daniel Tosh or something, you know, or Louis C.K. Like, these are all people that I feel like are spot on. But you know, they have these like elements of politics, and they are very subversive, but then they also have a spin on it to where you're like, okay, this is entertaining as well. Right.
That sort of dialogue that people have around those people, it can hopefully open the door for them to become involved in like you said, obviously decrease apathy and hopefully increase the curiosity of whatever it is that they're talking about. To be involved in something and like actually care.
Well, yeah, and this is another interesting thing too. Is like some of my friends trip out on me because I'm an atheist, and I have a friend of mine who is a minister of a church in San Diego, and he's gay, and he's openly gay, and so he is a gay minister, and I have so much respect for him, but I have so much respect for him not because he's gay, but because he's just like a badass, like. He's just insane. He's totally crazy, and he's not. I don't know. He's very interesting, and I where I do see his flaws, and I see him contradicting himself. I look past that, and I think like that guy is challenging everyone, you know, to an extent, or this sort of like status quo. He's challenging the status quo.
He's subverting the idea of what. I mean, I'm not sure what denomination he's preaching, but he's subverting the fact that of whatever faith he's professing. And then he's also subverting the fact that it's like he's so into his religion that he is a minister of it, and there's so many contradictions within that.
Yeah. So yeah, but part of me is like, dude, you should just pretty much like God is like it's written in the scriptures that He doesn't like you. You know?
Yeah. Have you looked at that part of the Bible that it says?
But he talked me into going. I went to see his sermon before, to see his one of his lectures, and I'm like, Jesus, I shouldn't be here. It's too early in the morning, and like, you know, I'm in the back, like in all black, like a vampire. So it's 8:00 in the morning. You know,
what am I doing here?
But I really respected him, and I thought like this is crazy. And he, you know, him and I have conversations, and we'll discuss these things, and he's not like trying to convert me, and I'm not trying to convert him. I just think like, well, this is insane. I totally have there's so much respect for you because whatever you're doing is at least creative, and at least I don't know. I guess I just see like I can relate to
right. There's a level of respect there that you're just like, while we don't agree philosophically, I like what you're doing.
Sure.
Right.
I mean, he was like, I guess he was responsible for this billboard in San Diego. His church was responsible. He was the one that, you know, spearheaded it, where it was an apology.
Oh, really?
It was like an apology for Christians being bigots or whatever.
Sure.
You know, and I was like, God, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Like, and that was gonna freaking piss off a lot of people.
Of course,
you know?
yeah.
So that was like, to me, that was like one of these stunts that I would pull, or like, you know, like I can relate to that, man. Like,
you're like, I would, if I was in your shoe, I was you, I would be doing like,
totally, yeah.
The intro to like independent music in general. You know, where did that place in your life? Like, were you in junior high school? Like, when did that start to, infiltrate you?
When I was about 10, I started getting into, it was through skateboarding. So I got into like Thrasher, skate rock comps.
Who introduced, like, was that just kind of out there? Like, how did that kind of come into your life? As far as
skateboarding was just,
it was just there.
The world was going to be like, you're going to do this, and you have to. I don't know how, I mean, I remember I was in Phoenix, and I came out to San Diego on a vacation, and I remember, it's so weird, I remember walking down this alley, and I was 9 or 10, and there was this skateboard in the middle of the road, and I was like, what? And it was green. And I remember like thinking like, well, I'm gonna,
like, this is Excalibur, just
yeah. And it was like in the middle of this alley,
right?
And I was so scared, and I was like, fuck, I'm gonna take it, you know. And I ran back to where I was staying with my parents, and I was like, I thought they were gonna be like, what are you doing? Where'd you know? And I was like, Mom, I found this. She's like, oh, cool. And then that was it. And I was like, okay, well, now this is like my jam and skateboarding. So I went back to Phoenix and would go to this mall, and they had a Vans. Back then, like the Vans stores were like they sold skateboards.
Right?
And there was this punk dude that worked there and was like, "All right, you know, if you're gonna buy this Rob Roskopf skateboard, you're gonna get this compilation tape. You know,
sure.
And,
I'll take you under my wing.
Yeah. And he's like, my band's on here. You check it out. I was like, oh my god, your band's on it, and it looks rad, and it's got a skateboard on the cover, and this is it. And like, I think it was just like. Yeah,
that was the starting point. Because your parents weren't musical at all. Like, did they have any interest?
They had records, and I remember like looking at Led Zeppelin records and stuff like that, and kind of tripping out. And well, actually, they were. My mom was really the Loverboy. I remember she like went and saw Loverboy open for Journey.
Okay,
and she was like, Loverboy was better than Journey.
They're the headliner.
Yeah, and I remember thinking like, that's crazy. Like, wonder. Why?
Right.
You know, why was it so much better? And so I had no idea. I thought I didn't really care.
Yeah.
But I was really into Van Halen. I remember in 1984 when that album came out.
Huge.
I wanted to go and you know, and I already had like obsessed over Kiss as a little kid. So then it's whatever that point was when I discovered these skate rock comps. I was like, this is weird, and like it's like not as like serious or like adult like, you know. I was like, this is like fucked up and not.
Right.
You know, it wasn't, I don't know, it was weird, and that was it. It was like, discovered all kinds of shit. You know, I remember just like, tripping out over Septic Death, and then learning about the Cramps, and, you know, and like, and then like, sort of like, figuring out like, what local bands were, and then it was just, I remember just like...
Just diving into it head first.
Yeah, and like, going to record stores, and I remember always seeing this sticker at this Zia record store in Phoenix.
Oh yeah.
And there was always this like this sticker, and it said the birthday party, and it was like the Junkyard record cover.
Oh sure.
And I was like, what is that cover? And, you know, it looks like something that a little kid would like. You know?
Yeah.
And I was like, what is the birthday party?
Right.
Whose party?
Yeah, this is birthday. I like birthdays.
Yeah, and, you know, I couldn't. And then it was just like, so I just started. It was like a floodgate, you know.
Yeah.
I couldn't learn fast enough.
Right. I always like. That part is so exciting too, because you, since you have no context for it, all you're doing is picking what you actually truly do like, as opposed to being influenced by, you know, your friends or whatever. I mean, that's all part of it, but like the fact that you could be interested in the birthday party and Cramps, like that's for all intent and purposes, that's, you know, more, especially the birthday party, that's more mature music. Like, you know, if you put that in front of like a 15-year-old brain, they're probably not ready to process like that challenging of a music as of yet. They're more geared to process like a punk band or whatever, which is obviously what you were doing at the same time.
But I feel like I don't know. I mean, I guess I never really. Okay, so when I discovered the birthday party at 11, it wasn't really like the lyrics and stuff. It was more just like the whole package, you know. I thought like the singer looks crazy,
right?
And
there's something to this.
Yeah. And I just remember thinking like seeing like pictures of them and thinking like, what the fuck, that guy looks so crazy. His hair is so big and crazy looking,
right?
And all of their artwork is really interesting to me,
right?
And it sounds nasty, like it sounds like it's mean and angry or like it to me, you know. I mean, discovering them at that age was very, the birthday party and the Cramps sort of, you know, definitely had this like kind of campy horror feel.
Right, so, that's true.
So it made sense to me.
Sure,
you know? I was
sure.
like, oh, this is like,
yeah, the over the topness of it. Sure.
It was like circusy kind of,
yeah,
like a dark circus, and I was like, oh, this is great. Like, I like this. I'm a kid and I like this. You know? Yeah.
You weren't deep diving into the themes of of what they were addressing from death, or you were really. Just it was topical.
But I remember like even way before that, I remember when I was a little kid and I was really into Mr. Roboto by Styx.
Oh yeah.
And the main reason was because it was like a robot
singing
song.
Yeah.
You know, and I was like, oh gosh, this is cool. So it would only make sense why I would like these other kind of bands, these like sort of goth bands, because I was like, oh, it's like a horror movie.
Right, yeah, the images lend itself to that, yeah, for sure. And so as you were going through, you know, high school and stuff like that, and as independent music was obviously like completely consuming you, when did because was Struggle your first band that you played in? Mm-hmm. That's pretty lucky that you actually. I mean, because like listening to Struggle now, like I mean, I'm sure you would listen to it and laugh at it in some respects, but I mean, it still kind of holds up. Like you can listen to stuff in the early '90s that is like, you know, like okay, like there's nothing that's happening there. So that's hard to do. Like, I mean, especially because when you don't have any like preconceived notion on what you want to accomplish, besides the fact that obviously you guys wanted to be a very political and confrontational band from that perspective.
But that was the thing, is I feel like maybe we lucked out because a lot of it.
Because were you in high school when Struggle was?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was 15.
Okay.
And
so yeah, freshman sophomore year. Yeah.
And I mean, I guess I just remember like. Well, a lot of it has to do with, I think, Jose Palafox.
Sure.
He became my friend when I was 14 and was working with the Revolutionary Communist Party.
Right.
And I was like, oh my god, this is fucking crazy. And like, and I for whatever reason, I felt I understood it, and I wanted to go to these protests. Part of me was like, there's all these other 14, 15, 16-year-old kids like doing stupid shit, you know, and like I want to do this other kind of stupid shit. Like I want to go fucking break shit and like get in trouble, but like do it with a
reason,
meaning or something, you know. And like fucking vandalism is rad if there's like a reason for it, you know, like And so and I think like I lucked out because not only was Jose a really good drummer, but he also had these other ties to these things that
new ideas that
you know, and it was crazy because all of us were just like, fuck yeah, like I don't think, you know, we weren't a communist band or anything, and I mean I think if anything, like, you know, I just remember like really being into half of what the Communist Party was saying, but then the other part of me was like I was really into like elements of crust punk and stuff, and I was like, well, what about anarchy, and like what about like you know, what about true equality, because the Communist Party weren't interested in like the LGBT community. They weren't interested in animal rights, and these are things that like I felt were being addressed. Like, you know, when I would get like the new Nausea album, it was like they were fucking talking.
You're
about
like, they're talking about all of that.
Yeah, and I was like, why not? Like, why can't we care? Why can't we also care about this? And they're like, we're about the worker struggle, and like, you know, they were very like into like the thing that turned me on to like the Communist Party was the struggle for women's rights, and I think also like identifying with race. And the race issue was very important in San Diego because a lot of my friends are Mexican, and we were next to the border. And this is like when Roger Hedgecock was doing the light up the border thing, and there was so much fucked up shit. And this is like actually right around the Rodney King riots.
Right.
And so I think like by default, like all the things that were happening was like, all right, we're going to be fucking political, you know? And it was really funny too because Jose was like, let's call our band Proletariat Struggle. And I said, well, we're not really like proletariats. I mean, I can't even get a job.
Right, I'm pretty young, yeah.
But him and I both worked at the swap meet. And, and we sold T-shirts, you know, every weekend.
Sure.
And bootleg T-shirts and cassette tapes. And and it was for his uncle's business, which became Music Trader, which I don't think is even a business.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
So he turned that the swap meet business into Music Trader.
Yeah.
Wow, crazy.
So it was kind of weird how it was like. Well, I don't know if he turned it into it, but somehow it was like
affiliated with
it became Music Trader eventually.
Sure. Nuts.
So I remember like, I was already working and I was like, hey, well, yeah, I was like, well, technically only half of our band is our proletariats. And
right.
The other two are not working. Yeah, I don't know. It's just weird. It just seemed fitting.
Yeah. To like combine those two those two elements that brought, made you feel more comfortable with the message that you were putting out.
Sure.
It wasn't just focused on this one thing.
But then coming full circle,
Yeah.
not to keep like harshing on Strife.
Yeah.
It was like we would show up being 16 years old to like play a show with Strife.
Yep.
And they had like new gear and new clothes, and they probably didn't have jobs yet, and we were like, fuck, man, I have to go to work in the morning. Like, we're in LA playing in this dude's backyard, and I gotta fucking go to work and school tomorrow. You know? And like, we also, like, on the way up to the show, like, had to stop and shoplift so we could, pay.
Eat or whatever.
And so it was like, so we were like, well, how are we gonna relate to this situation?
Yeah. You're like, there's a distinct difference. And I think a lot of that too. I mean, it's like the way that San Diego in general obviously had to develop the music scene was always going to be not referenced because they're always referencing either Orange County or LA.
Yeah.
And so you guys were always were left to your own devices because of that.
Yeah, but then we got Gravity Records. I mean, that like fucked everybody up.
Totally. Yeah.
More than Ebullition or anything.
Totally. Yeah. Once that existed and once that reputation preceded itself, it was like you couldn't return from that.
Yeah.
Like, once that had been set in motion, it was like, cool, you got, weird looking hair, you got white belts, like perfect, done. You're good. And so I presume because of obviously all your political beliefs that you were, fostering as you were going through high school, I presume that like the idea of like, oh man, I can't wait to graduate, can't wait to join the working world. Like that was never part of your agenda. Like, did you have stuff that you wanted to do from a profession standpoint, or was it just like, I just want to tour and exist and be creative?
I remember I remember Jose graduating a year before me, or 2 years before me.
Sure.
Maybe one. I don't know. I remember him graduating before me, and I was. Yeah, 1 year before me, and I was like, whoa, dude, this is crazy. Like, you made it. I don't think any of us would make it, but I definitely didn't think you would make it.
Right.
And I was like, this is fucking crazy.
Right.
And then it kind of like, no one ever really talked about it, but his whole thing was like, he went to Berkeley and became a professor, and, I guess I wish I had those aspirations, but I was like, let's fucking go on tour, and it wasn't, it wasn't struggle. We just started new bands, and I just started doing new things, and I put out a record, but I was in college. I went to community college right away, like right after high school. I was actually in my senior year of high school. I was already going to community college.
Okay.
But the reason why I was so into community college was because I was getting financial aid, and I was using that money to put out records.
Perfect.
And so
and that was the inception of 31G.
But I never thought like I'm gonna get a career, and then I don't know. I mean, part of me thinks like I should have fucking got my shit together. But like, look, I'm not dead, and I'm not
right.
I'm not at the bottom, and I've lived life, and I've done all these things that I enjoy, and I'm glad I did it.
Right.
So I don't have any.
Yeah, you're never going to look at that and regret that. It's just a matter of obviously what a person has as far as their focal point. Like if they're like, okay, I'm going to graduate high school, I'm going to go teach or whatever they feel that passion for. And it's like sometimes it just doesn't manifest itself in a way that is meaningful to like the world. I presume it was just like, well, I like being creative. I like being political and creative in this context. So like, how can I figure out how to like keep doing that? I imagine that was maybe some thought process.
I think part of it is, but I don't know, man. It's a trip because I always would reference my mom and my dad. When I was growing up, my parents were very strange. At one point in time, my dad worked for the electric company, my mom worked for the gas company, and that's opposing companies.
Right? Yeah.
And everyone was like, "Did your parents fight?" And I was like, "Well, they do fight all the time, but they fought before that."
Right.
And I was like, "Well, I don't know. It's weird. I don't think they fight with their jobs." But they were both unhappy, and I remember thinking, like, it's so strange that they hate those elements of their lives. Like it's like this shit that
totally
they have to do.
That they spend a lot of their time doing, right?
Yeah, and I would always think to myself, maybe that's why they're alcoholics, and maybe that's why they fight each other. And you know, to me, I thought, okay, I'm gonna just like do whatever I have to do to survive, and like try to make it fun and interesting to myself. And then now that I look back, I think like, God, I was like a gypsy, or like I still am sort of like a gypsy.
Totally,
like,
yeah.
I don't know. I just kind of like not fumble through stuff because part of it is calculated, but I kind of like the fact that like there is huge chunks of my life where I'm like, I have no clue what I'm doing.
Right.
But like,
to me, what it is like you've always struck me as a person where it's like you're all you're trying to do is create the environment, like you said, where you're just, you know, doing stuff to survive, but you're creating an environment in which you can obviously, for one, express yourself, and for two, like, be creative. Whether that is putting out records, you know, with the record label, or whether that is starting some sort of, you know, new musical project, whatever that may mean. Mm-hmm. All you're trying to do is just like trying to create that environment, and usually it is through like a life of struggle in regards to like, well, I don't know where I'm going to be in 2 or 3 months because I don't have this particular job or whatever, you know. So it's you know, I think that's, to me, that's the through line of what it is that you're like focused on. We're just like, well, yeah, I don't know where I'm going to be in a year, but I have created this space to express myself creatively.
Or I just always kind of know, like, I won't die. Like, I know, like, I mean, I'm pretty sure I can
make it through.
I'll hustle and figure it out.
Right. And so then, you know, as the Locust started to progress and start to become, you know, I mean, for all intent purposes, like a serious band where it's like, you know, you guys were, you know, doing well, like people were noticing what you were doing. You know, did it become a career in the sense of where it's like, and I use the word career loosely, but like where it was like you guys were you're living off of that and you could dedicate all of your time to that. So it was the business stuff started to infiltrate it. Like how did that, because that was a weird part in independent music in general where bands started to see money, but like not to the extent of where it's like, oh wow, here's hundreds of thousands of dollars, because that wasn't a reality.
Yeah, we never saw that.
But you guys were able to sustain yourself, correct? Like as you were, or no, it was like you got home from tour, jobs.
We always had jobs. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, there was one point where I didn't have like a day job,
right?
Not by choice, and I just really tried to run 31G and do the Locust, and I scraped by.
Yeah.
And that was for like 2 years, but for the most part, I always had a job and some sort of income, you know. But with the Locust, I mean, you know, we would do okay on tour,
right?
But it wasn't like we were seeing royalty checks or anything, you know.
No.
But, so, and it was really strange too, because I feel like we stopped at the point where if we kept going, I feel like we would have actually started to see a lot of money.
Sure.
And the whole thing was like we kind of quit playing live, and we kept writing a record, and then we kind of quit writing the record. I think just because everybody was involved in other things and kind of getting burnt out, you know.
Yeah.
And you know, it's nice that we are able to revisit it. We did play those shows recently,
right.
At some point, all of us will get back into it full force. But the world is strange, and we don't.
You need to be right. You need to be in the right space.
It'll happen at some
point. Totally.
Because it's kind of weird too, because like right now, it's like I feel like, okay, if we were to just go and do that, that could be our careers.
Right.
Part of me thinks like, geez, why don't we do that? Like we already paid the dues. But then I think like, okay, well then you're gonna ruin that.
Sure.
You're gonna be like the band that got back together for the wrong reason.
Yeah, no, it's true, and I'm sure that's been a continual struggle with like the stuff that you've done from a creative aspect, where it's like, because no matter what, the idea of art and commerce will always clash, and so it's like, did you either from running the record label or running the business of the band, was it always that kind of like push and pull of like, all right, like.
We never ran the business of the band because we owe so much money in taxes.
Okay.
And we were never gonna fucking pay it. So even if we saw money that like paid our rent for a month when we were on tour,
right. It's a moot point.
It's pointless because we owe them a lot. I don't even know how much a lot.
Right. Obviously, having to join, you know, the context of obviously a capitalist society, which obviously, you know, that was something that you struggled against. You know,
but wait, I'm not really against capitalism.
Sure.
I mean, I ran a record label. It's
right.
Not,
no. Yeah.
But I think there's like productive capitalism. And
That's
there's
true.
Just like
a greed. A greed-driven one.
Yeah.
Sure. So yeah, that obviously like But I guess more so to the point, the business aspect, did you find yourself like good at it? Like, did you enjoy that aspect of it?
No.
Okay.
I hate taxes. I hate paperwork.
Right.
You know, I just want to think of these ideas like, oh, let's do this record that's shaped like a heart, you know? Or like...
let's do a picture disc 5-inch or whatever.
Something, you know? And, or like, let's put this tour. Let's go on this tour and like only play like, you know...
Yeah.
Sewers or something, you know? And I know these ideas are great. These are awesome ideas, and they're not going to make any money.
Right.
So the money. I mean, I understand the rationality behind things because that also I'm into that. I'm like, okay, well, we can't do that because it's gonna just we're gonna bottom out. But I think like the business stuff was never because everyone's always even now it's like even currently people are like, what's the future of music? And like journalists are trying to figure it out. And it's like fuck you guys for even talking about it. Like the future's like right. Why like right now it's happening. Like there's music happening right now. Like you should care about these bands right now.
Right. Yeah, they're focusing on the business and how labels adapt as opposed to like actually, what's a more interesting story of bands that are existing in the quote unquote the new paradigm and the new context.
Well, they look at things like what sold in the past and what was hip and let's do that again.
Of
and
course.
Then for the people that I was always like associated with, we were always like, what's happening right now? Like let's do something right now and not really care about the consequences.
Right. Well, yeah, it was very reactionary. Like the stuff that you either did from a record label perspective or from a musical perspective was you kind of were able to trace the idea of like where it came from. Where it was like, okay, like we'll put together a like the Locust Airborne Radar split of the jigsaw puzzles. Like you saw why they did that because it was like 31G, like they've always done creative packaging or like zany ideas, you know? And so it was like, oh yeah, like you got that. And it was like, yeah, they're friends with Airborne Radar. So yeah, of course, like you see that as opposed to like, oh, here's a calculated move. Like, it was a reaction. Like, of course, this is a great idea. Let's do this. Let's bring it out into the world.
I mean, meeting Airborne Radar changed my life. Yeah. They were a whole other level of just fucked up.
Oh, yeah. No one can make sense of them. And so then the fact that obviously you yourself are still being, creative from the record label perspective, creative from, playing in Retox and, all leather, as you grow older within the context of a, essentially youth driven music, you have to work harder to kind of stay involved as you grow older because life gets in the way of that or whatever. Why is it still important for you to obviously be involved from that perspective? Why is it important for you to play, like a warehouse show with Retox or whatever? Like,
but what else would I do? I don't know.
No, I mean, yeah, it's a fair question to yourself.
I just think like I wake up and I go like, today I want to do this, or like these are the things that I want to work towards.
Sure.
And then I leave it at that.
Right. You're like, it's as simple as that.
That's all that's on my mind. Is like these elements of art and politics and culture, like that's all that's consuming me. So therefore, like, I mean, I know there's all these other things I could do. I could just stop being weird and go and get a career,
Right.
But I could do that. I really could. I totally could. But I don't want to.
Right.
And I know I don't have to. And so I just don't. Right.
And the notion of not saying relevant, but staying current with obviously the state of music in general. What inspires you to obviously like keep checking out new bands and obviously keep involved from that perspective? Because it's one thing to be involved from like creating music, but it's another thing to be involved to be like, hey, here are these great new bands that I found out about personally that I want to do something with, or just enjoy them.
But it's kind of like that time when I was a little kid and I just turned the corner and walked down that alley and there was a skateboard. Right. Like I don't know, because I remember there was this interview where they were asking Gabe Serbian like what are his favorite like hardcore bands or something, and he said I don't listen to hardcore, I just play it. And I was like, fuck, that's a great point, like yeah. Because like I don't know, I don't want to sound like an asshole, but I don't really listen to that like a lot of that kind of music. Like
of course,
like we talked about Rob, fucking love Narrows. Totally love that new album. It's like one of my favorite albums. It's such a good album. I love the band. Right. But Narrows was like the skateboard in the alley, Right. And so, like, I'm about to go on tour with Dillinger Escape Plan and Trash Talk. Yep. I know Dillinger very well. Trash Talk, I've never heard them. I mean, I've heard like one song.
Right. You're aware of them.
It
but
wasn't.
yeah.
It wasn't the skateboard in the alley for me. It was just like, oh, it's trash talk. That's fine. I'm sure they're good.
Sure.
But like, I don't know. But like but Dillinger, like they presented themselves. They're not like they personally presented themselves to me, but that band,
we are worshiping the altar of Justin.
No, that band presented itself to me like, whoa, what the fuck is this?
What's happening? Yeah.
You know, like this is weird. Like it presented itself in a strange way in Japan and Tokyo. The Locust was on tour, and we played one show with them a long time ago. And I was like, "Who the fuck are these guys?"
Right.
You know, and that was it. I was like, "Okay," and this is it. And now I love Ben and Liam, and I think they're a fantastic band.
Totally.
So it's like, I just think like I don't know. I don't. It's not that I'm like today. What am I going to go find? I mean, the last few days I've been like pushing forward with all this 3-1G stuff.
Right.
Announcing that we're doing the Retox Narrow split.
Yep.
Repress or finally releasing this Kill the Capulets record, which is a weird obscure band. Is not a band anymore, but I think it's such a great record that has like Mike from Retox and the Festival of the Deer, but also has Rocky Crane from Your Future, who was also in Some Girls for a minute. Like you know, all these different elements.
The family, yeah.
And so it's like, so I didn't, you know, it wasn't like, so is there like a really relevant like kind of band like happening that I should go find and sign or put out the record? You know, no, I want the world to just present it,
right?
And that will be it. I mean, I guess lately, like I just discovered this guy David Van Ronk, this old folk singer.
Sure,
totally obsessing over his music.
Well, see, I think it doesn't, it doesn't matter necessarily like what music obviously like is tickling your fancy for that particular moment, but it's the fact that you still feel like you still get that feeling of like to be obsessed with something, to just be like find out about it and then be like, I have to know everything about that person.
Yeah.
Like, and that, because I don't think that's not how, for all intent and purposes, like normal people work. Like, whatever, they may get obsessed with the sports team and obviously know all of the history behind that or whatever. But it's like, most people interact with, especially music, where it's like they hear it and then, oh, that's a good song, and that's essentially where it ends.
Yeah. But, it was like for me, like discovering like that birthday party sticker. It was just a sticker.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, what is that? And I want to know everything about it. Finding these little things. Like, I don't know I don't really understand how, I hate the algorithms of Pandora and stuff like that. But I was in my girlfriend's car and she was listening to, what's that movie that came out, the Coen Brothers film about the folk singer?
Inside Llewellyn Davis.
Yeah, okay, that came out. And she was listening, she went to like the soundtracks Pandora or something.
Right.
And then all of a sudden this Dave Van Ronk song came on and I was like, holy crap, what is this guy? What is this?
Right.
It was the most evil thing. It was all vocal only, and there was like him like hitting his floor. And it was like talking about having no balls and going to war and all this fucked up shit. Saying fuck, he was saying like fucking and I was like, whoa. And so I was like, I made a note. I wrote down his name. Yeah. Bought the CD. I actually purchased the CD.
Right.
And then like the next day, I was like, told Nathan Joyner from All Leather, dude, we gotta cover this song. And a week later, we covered it.
I love that. Just like as quick as it can be.
Yeah.
That's just,
but like that song existed since the 60s or 70s. And
it can still inspire.
It just happened right now. And I was like, this is it. This is the best thing. It totally makes so much sense to me.
Right.
We're not, the Vietnam War's not happening, but there's all kinds of other fucking wars happening. And this is like, it just makes, it like set chills down my spine. I was like, we need to do that. Right. So the inspiration would come from things like not irrelevant, but most people would be like, oh yeah, I listen to like this kind of hardcore, or like with All Leather, like I totally fucking dig Skrillex. Like,
right, yeah.
But it's like no, like I listened to this folk singer and fucking thought like, dude, let's cover that shit.
Yeah, let's make it sound like this.
Yeah,
right. Two last things I want to hit on. One is more of this I think is just a funny observation in regards to like the reputation preceding you and reputation specifically for the Locust. So it's like when you guys made those compact mirrors, where everybody was just like, oh, like Locust, like the cocaine band.
Yeah.
Like, it was one of those things where it was so it completely embodied that era of music and how people placed so much. I mean, whether or not you guys did that intentionally, whether it was like, oh, like, dude, we're just making this a compact. Like, this is, the girls like our music too, so, like, that'll exist. But people immediately took that
and ran with it in like a completely different direction. I mean, did you have so much negative feedback from that particular instance, and was that like frustrating for you guys to be like, oh God, whatever?
It's frustrating for me because I never even did cocaine, so I think like I was like, dude, okay, it'd be one thing if I did it,
right?
But I haven't done it, and so you guys are fucking lame for talking shit about me,
right?
There was times I remember being on tour, and I remember this girl yelling at me, "You made my friend do cocaine," and I was like, what the fuck? I haven't even done it myself, like, and she thought I was Gabe. And I was like, dude, you got the wrong guy. And I was on tour with some girls, so I was like, wrong fucking band, wrong guy.
you were off base, period.
But I mean, not to throw Gabe under the bus. I've been mistaken for him by the police, like all kinds of shit.
Right.
You know, like
it's happened for a while.
I mean, yeah, but the negative thing was a drag, and it came out right when that Jerry Springer thing came out. So there was like. So for me, it was weird because it was like, oh, there's this fucking douchebag rock dude, drug addict, and I was like, okay, these are like, haha, it's a joke. Like, you guys take everything so fucking serious, you know?
Right.
And that, you know, and but at the same time, it's like the mirrors were presented to us for free, and it was me hustling, thinking like, okay, what can we do with 10,000 of these fucking compact mirrors?
Right.
Let's put a sticker on them and sell them.
Of course,
because we're broke.
Right.
You know,
it was the same reactionary philosophy of like, oh yeah, well, we have these, so let's do these with these.
Yeah. Most people would not have thought to do anything with it.
No,
you know? They were gonna go in the trash. I was like, no. Fuck, hold on, and let me just think this out. You know,
don't throw that away yet. This could be valuable.
And it was.
Yeah,
and it was valuable because we sold them and made some money to go on tour and put gas in our van.
Right.
But it also projected us into this sort of like thing, you know, like, oh, let's talk about this band. And it wasn't just like, oh, there's this band that has keyboards and you know, it was
they wear masks.
It was like, there's this fucking band who are a bunch of drug addicts. Fuck those guys, you know. And then like after a while, then there was like bands like start writing songs about how they hated us.
Right.
It's like, okay, fuck yeah, we're succeeding.
Right.
By not even trying, you know, like we didn't even try.
Right.
It just was like here.
Yeah, here's this simple item that caused so much angst, and like you said, it goes back to the idea of like you're provoking a reaction, and that's ultimately what you wanted to do across the board, like, regardless.
But part of it, I think, was like came out of the whole like very conservative mindset of like ebullition and that stuff. You know, which is just so weird to me because I don't know that I was part of that community, and they rejected swing kids. They were like, oh, you guys are artsy, and you know, it's like, well, all right.
Rejected swing kids, like how so? Like rejected as far as like you aren't a valid, like this, you can't be a part of our community because you guys are
kind of. We played our first show in Santa Barbara.
Santa Barbara, sure.
And Kent McClard just made fun of us while we were playing, and it's like because we were three people from struggle, you know, and to me it was like it was the same as struggle, but we weren't talking about like how we fucking hated police. Right. Because we already talked about that.
Yeah, you know? We did that, right.
And we just so happened, I got rid of my dreadlocks. Right. You know, and that was about the extent of it. I wasn't like a total scumbag anymore. Right. I was like, okay, I need to get a job. I'm going to fucking not look like a dirtbag.
Right. I can't have these, like, 4-inch dreads. Like,
So what was the point? Like, we were the same fucking, essentially the same people.
Right.
But it was like, you guys are fucked. Like, you're not part of this community.
You're cast off.
Like, all right, well, that's fine, I guess.
We'll find our community elsewhere. And the last thing I want to hit on was the idea of obviously, like, you know, continuing to, you know, move forward and be creative, and in the face of obviously adversity from, you know, just in general, like life getting in the way and stuff like that. Do you see yourself, you know, stopping creating music to focus on, you know, other creative aspects?
Yeah.
I mean, let me put it this way. Is touring still fun for you from a, you know, a holistic perspective? Like, is it still enjoyable, or is it like, God, this sucks doing this 8-hour drive or whatever. Like, I've done this a million times or whatever. Like, you know, how does touring sit with you in your own head now?
I never go into tour thinking like, this is going to be rad or this is going to suck. I just look at it like, I'm going to go do this tour.
Sure.
And, like, not really have expectations.
Okay.
So there's been few times, I have pretty low standards, so there's been a few times where it's like, okay, this is fucking bullshit.
Right.
For instance, like we went to Europe, Retox did, and we had this driver who was a total son of a bitch.
Okay.
And we all hated him.
Sure.
But we were with him every single day, and he was a fuckhead. And it's like, okay, well, what do we do at this point? Like, for the next 3 weeks, this is going to suck.
Right.
Really bad every day. And it did. It sucked the whole time.
Right.
So there's that kind of element, you know. But then you land at, you know, you go to a tour and you're like, dude, we want our driver to be this guy. You know, my friend from the Czech Republic who's awesome.
Right.
And then your tour's rad. And you're like, okay, I can have fun every day. And like, he's a cool dude and he's keeps it together and doesn't yell at me and, you know, like whatever, or like doesn't disappear. You know, but like, so things like that are like always good. But, you know, we just did this really short Mexico tour and we flew to Monterrey. You know, we weren't making any money and it was just like, let's go play this festival and like play these other shows and it'll be fun. And I remember like getting down there and like, it was pretty cool. And my standards were low and I was like, okay, I'll just roll with it. And thinking like, what's this weird? They're making this headline after Death, that band.
From Detroit,
the
right?
Black dudes, not the metal band,
right? Not Death, yeah.
But I was like, they're making this headline after Death. It's so weird. Okay, well, whatever. I guess maybe because we're like hardcore or something. And then I was like, okay, it's starting to rain, and then like it rained out Death's like half of their set or whatever. Like, and then they just were like, okay, festival's gonna be over. Like, you're not gonna play. And so, like, we still got paid the little bit of money that we were supposed to get paid, but, like, we didn't get to play.
Right.
And then I, like, flew back to Tijuana, and I was like, that just completely sucked.
Yeah. Right. Doing all of this to go down there and have nothing, like, not even be able to do...
Like, it's not even about the money, or it wasn't about anything. It was, like, I didn't get to play a show.
Right.
So, like, I just went and, like, walked around this festival.
Right. Which is kind of a torturous experience for a festival.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting to some extent, but it was like, okay, but the whole like pinnacle of that experience was like you're supposed to play a show, and then you're thinking like, well, fuck, like people probably think we're not playing.
Yeah, like this is an intentional decision.
But like we literally like couldn't get onto the stage. They cut the power because there was like sparks and shit.
Oh, right.
It was like that.
We could die if we played.
Yeah.
The idea that obviously once you put art into the world. You know, it's obviously not yours. Like, people are going to do whatever they want with it. And the idea that obviously, you know, a lot of stuff that, you know, we create when we are young still exists, you know, from, like, Swing Kids Struggle. Like, everything that you have done from that perspective. And people, you know, place so much importance on that stuff. And maybe, like, obviously don't pay attention to, like, what you're doing currently now, you know? Is it one of those things where it's weird for people to have, just because you have been so prolific, to have these different like entry points to your musicalness? Like a person that knows, you know, Retox has no fucking clue about Swing Kids, like, or vice versa, where it's like, you know, is it weird to have those interactions with people where it's kind of like, oh yeah, like there's some other stuff I've done in the past or whatever, like not like you were saying that yourself, but like.
I don't really think, like, when someone, like, just finds out about Retox, I'm like, you should hear all my other
Right.
Because for the most part, I kind of think, like, don't listen to that stuff.
Right. Yeah, you're like, yeah, what I'm doing right now, I feel is a perfect for what you need right now.
I mean, I'm proud of everything I've done, but at the same time, I look back and I think, like, okay, there's only, like, a portion of stuff that I've been part of that I feel I would still, like, push on someone.
Right.
So, like, someone that discovers Retox, I would say, like, you should listen to Some Girls.
Yeah,
you know, or like you should listen to the very last Swing Kids 7-inch and then not the first stuff. You know, or you know, like or like don't listen to Crimson Curse at all.
Right.
So I think like I would feel like that.
Sure.
But I also think like when people are like, like Swing Kids, I love Swing Kids, and I'm like, yeah, but you should hear Retox. It's a lot better.
Right.
And it's new.
It's now. Right.
And that's the only time I would think I'd ever say something to someone. I would never say like, "You should listen to everything that I've ever."
I've done some rad shit in the past. Yeah, exactly.
But when they reference like only this old thing from 15, 20 years ago,
right?
I'm like, no. But like right now, I'm actually in this band. You know, like I'm right now on a tour.
Right. Yeah, right. You have the ability to see this currently happening in your city.
Well, there's been times where I'm like in a city,
right?
And they're like, "Oh my god." You know, I'm in a record store or something, like, you're Justin from Swing Kids. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, oh, yeah, I love that 7-inch. And what are you doing?
What are you doing here?
And like, oh, I'm in a new band that's like, I think it's better. It's more relevant. It's way more like, musically challenging or better or something.
Right.
And then they're like, oh, cool, later, dude. And then that's like, okay, well, fuck,
that's it. Yeah, well, like, I guess that's lost on you.
I feel like if I ran into someone, like when I was a little kid, I was really obsessed with septic death. So if I ran into Pusshead, and I was like, fuck, you're Pusshead from Septic Death, you know? And he was like, oh, I'm actually in San Diego on tour with my new band.
Right.
I would go to that goddamn show.
Right.
Like, what? You're in a new
You're like,
fucking
I
band?
didn't, yeah. You know? That's my fault for not knowing that.
Yeah. I would have been like, cool, have a good show tonight, dude. I'm out of here.
Right. Like, oh, that's, yeah. So technically, I don't necessarily care about anything you're doing right now. Yeah. I really like the combination of jazz and hardcore. I was basically, that was all I was interested in. Well, I really appreciate you hanging out and doing this.
Yeah.
And I hope it was enjoyable for you in some respects.
Yeah.
Alrighty. So yeah, we're about one episode away from the end of June, which is our month of what I define as very, very important people within the context of like punk and hardcore, heavy music in general. These are people who have been involved for a long time, and it just happened to sync up. So thank you to Justin for hanging out with me, taking the time out of his day. He was about to leave for a tour in like 2 or 3 days after we did the interview, so he had a lot in his mind, but he's like, no, let's do this, man. This will be fun. And yeah, so thank him for that. This episode, as always, is produced by Tom Richfield, my good bro and buddy and confidant in this show. Visit propertyofzach.com, visit 100wordspodcast.com, and yeah, toss a review for the show if you are enjoying it. And on next week is Sean Ingram, the vocalist for the band Coalesce, who I think they're still around. They still consider themselves an active band in regards to maybe playing a festival here or there each year. But he also runs a company called Blue Collar Distro, which is a great online resource for merchandise and all that sort of stuff. But anyways, that will conclude our themed month. But yeah, it's been really fun to have that as a running theme, because I just never have done that with this show. So it was fun. Until next week, be safe, everybody.